We're joined by Davina Warden, the marketing director for pursuits in the West region for Cumming Group, who has bravely navigated the challenging journey from burnout to recovery. In this episode, titled Interview with a Recovering Burnout, we will hear her firsthand account of how she recognized the signs of burnout in her life, the steps she took to heal, and how she now manages to keep burnout at bay. Her story is not only inspiring, but also full of practical advice and insights that can help anyone struggling with burnout. So without further ado, let's dive into this enlightening conversation. Hi, everybody. My name's Jeff.
And I'm Rochelle.
And this
is Burnout Banter.
Before we jump into today's episode, remember to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen so that you can stay up to date with the latest banter. Welcome, Davina.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I stumbled on my words there in the intro.
I was like, well, it might be kind of fitting. Barely navigating.
We're all just doing our best, right? That's all this is.
So do you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into the industry and what
Sure. So as you mentioned in the introduction, I'm the marketing director for pursuits for the West region for my company Cumming Group. So I have a team of 8 managers and coordinators, and we're the in-house team for the company. We manage all of the pursuits, so RFP responses, being formal and informal solicitations, and as well as marketing support, so collateral development, so pitches, SOQs, sales sheets, those kinds of things too. So we're a large team, for our company size. We are a busy team, and I've been in the role for about two years now.
Okay.
So how I got into the industry, I actually transitioned into the construction or AEC industry after a lengthy career in academia. So I've been at the company for about 5 years, and that's kind of the extent of my experience in the construction industry. I had a brief kind of 3-year bout as working with a geotechnical engineering firm while I was working on my master's degree, but that was several years ago.
And what did you teach in academia?
So I was English. I was English department faculty. My whole background was English literature. I did that for a while. That was really my intended career path before I transitioned into marketing and proposals in particular. And when I was looking to transition out of education and out of academia, I was looking at different jobs, and I applied to some grant writing jobs. I was trying to find a way that, my skills would be transferable to a different role. And I thought, well, grant writing's perfect. I've done a lot of grant writing for my own research. I'll just grant write for a living. And then I spoke to a friend of mine who was working at Jacobs at the time, and he said, you'd probably be really good at proposals. And I said, what's that? What is that? And then I started applying to those jobs and got one pretty quickly. So.
And was burnout part of the reason why you wanted to transition out of academia, or?
Yeah, well, looking back on it, yeah. I definitely knew I needed a change. And I think when people are kind of at a point where they're evaluating where they are in life and if this is what they want to keep doing, that's kind of part of it. Do I want to keep doing this for the next however many years, or do I want to try something different? And there was a whole number of different factors that influenced my decision to move out of academia. It was a difficult decision because, my job as an educator was one that I loved. And I still talk about that job as being the job that I loved, but it's one that I needed to move on from for a number of reasons. So I think looking back on it now, burnout was all over the place. We never used the term, I don't remember anyone saying burnout in those years when I was teaching, but as I think about it now, it was all around me. It was all around us, whether it was students or whether it was, my colleagues. We were all exhausted. We were all, working, at a pretty packed schedules, whether it was a teaching course load, plus all of the additional responsibilities that come with being a faculty, member of the faculty. But the thing about it was, I don't think many of us recognized that we were burned out, because in that kind of environment where it's really mission driven, right? So education is one of those fields. It's mission driven, and it's there's an intellectual activity and energy that sustains you through exhaustion sometimes. And if you're really passionate about what you're doing, sometimes you can feed on that, right? That's the thing that kind of drives you and keeps you, really focused and motivated, even though your body might be feeling the toll of burnout. Your relationships might be feeling the toll of burnout. And that's pretty common in education and in other fields, definitely in other fields too.
Yeah, I think it shows up in construction too, with architects, engineers,
Yeah.
maybe contractors. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think you definitely see it in architects a lot, where they're really passionate about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Creative
And they're
aspect.
working on a project, and there's a lot of their own creativity and energy going into the thing that they're producing and putting together. So yeah, that can be the thing, the drive and the passion that sustains you as you're doing a 24-hour work session, or you're working all night long. It's that sense of passion that's driving you, but then that compounds over time. And when you do that for years, right, it does take a toll on many areas of your life.
So this may be a bit of a loaded question, but how did you deal with it in the past?
So I didn't.
Or
I mean,
not?
it's not a loaded question at all. I didn't deal with it. I didn't recognize it. I thought I was thriving, on the outside of it. I'm always prepared in the classroom. I'm always ready. I was asked to volunteer a lot for different types of committee work. I was doing my own research. I thought I was handling everything on all the fronts, and I'd be like, yeah, all right, Davina, we're killing it. We're doing okay, but I did get to the point like around, year 12 where I was just tired, and I couldn't explain it, and things were kind of unraveling a little bit all around me. I know that I was kind of detaching from things. So it definitely culminated in a point where I needed to make a change. But during that whole kind of, decade plus that I was in that environment, again, loved it. It was invigorating. There's a lot that I miss about it. I did not recognize that it was a thing, that something was happening to me, that all of these different things were having major impacts on my life. And it wasn't until I'd been in it for a while that I saw that I needed to make some major decisions in my life.
Okay.
Did any of those decisions or any of those thoughts involve rest? Like when you said, I need to make a change, where you're
Such
like,
a good
I
question.
need to just take time off, or I need like a 3-month sabbatical or something.
That seems like such a natural kind of, conclusion to come to. And I never came to that. In many cases, my answer to feeling like I was overwhelmed was to try and work harder or give up more potential for rest. Rest never entered my mind as a thing to do. It was always like, well, work harder, get caught up, right? At the time I was working on a dissertation, and I was like, well, when this dissertation is done, right? And when this project is done, I'll be able to rest. It was always something that I needed to get done and then I can rest, right? But I never gave myself that chance, or that time. I never created that space for myself. So I became known as the person who, yeah, Davina won't go to this because she's working. Davina is the person that brings work with her wherever she goes. Davina goes on, visits her sister for Christmas break and brings all of her work with her, so I had definitely developed this reputation of somebody who just doesn't turn it off.
Yeah, and I think the tricky part about that too is that you get acknowledgement for it, right? And you have career success.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, Jeff. There's something about as I learned about what's kind of driving this tendency or this compulsion to work, a lot of that was that I was getting positive reinforcement for doing more and saying yes. And, I became the person that could, oh, Davina can teach that course. She can teach anything, or have Davina do that, and I would do it, and then I would get like, good job, pat on the back. And I was like, okay, so this is reinforcing, my tendency to say yes to things. But it also resulted in absolute absence of boundary, between work and life.
So you switched from academia to construction and working on proposals. And did you find yourself kind of going down the same path, or?
Exactly the same path. In fact, I made that decision. I quit my PhD program and I thought, I'm going to get rid of this albatross and I'm going to move on. And And at the time, definitely one of the impacts of burnout was me detaching. And it was having an impact on my marriage. So I had been married for about 14, 15 years at that point, and it was definitely, I knew that I needed to make a change. I could not keep, not being present for relationships, and I could not keep prioritizing work over people in my life. So I get this new job and I think I'm not going to have the same kind of pressure. But the habits of mind that I had developed over the last 13 years, and really that even went before that when I was a college student, those tendencies, they were still there in full force, right? And I found that in marketing and in proposals, you can do the same exact thing where you can work 24/7, right? It's deadline driven. It's something that you can get really excited and invigorated about. Like when we're working on a submission and it's, we feel like we've got this, or we've got a team that's really dedicated and the ideas are flowing and you're doing something that maybe is a little bit more creative. You want to produce and you want to get it out and you want it to be the best quality product. So fell into the exact same habits. And at the same time, I think one of the, I don't know if symptoms of burnout is a kind of frustrated, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a sense of just discontent, right? I wanted to fix everything that was wrong, right? So I would start to point out things and then I would develop like PowerPoint presentations and I would say like, we need to do it this way. And this is the better proposal process. And, I was trying to always push towards improvement. So I was doing more work than I was even asked to do, but I felt like I wanted to make this, I wanted to be passionate about something again. And I was trying to find a way to become really invested in this role like I had been in my previous job. And I was just overdoing it. Same exact tendencies, same exact lack of boundary in life and work. And I think I was about a year and a half into this job, into this role. And I was in a coordinator position at the time. I wasn't even managing people yet. I was just getting all worked up and wanting to be, really impactful and really overexerting myself. So I fell into the same habits. Long story short.
I know Rochelle talks about this all the time, and I don't know how many of us that are not in a marketing role get it. How much pressure do you all take on for the success of the firm? And you talked about wanting to win the proposals and the pursuits and put the best foot forward.
Well, every time we work on and Rochelle can probably speak to this too, we want every proposal to be a winning proposal, right? And my attitude towards every single proposal I was working on was, I want this to be the best proposal that's ever been, that I can possibly produce, right? And so I would work really long hours. I would keep moving things around. I would keep trimming things, and it resulted in a good work product. But sometimes I would be pushing it, pretty close to the deadline because I need to just move a couple more things, or I just need to I think we can make this line a bit more impactful. We can do something a little bit, So, and I would remember when I was working on my dissertation chair would always say, a good dissertation is a done dissertation, right? Because in those situations too, you can rework chapters forever, right? And never submit the thing. Now you have a hard deadline when it comes to proposals, but I had that same tendency to want to, well, maybe we can, I don't know if it's good enough, or, we've got to do a little bit more to it. So I think a lot of the pressure was internal to try to make this product like the greatest thing ever. But then there's also the volume, our team handles a pretty high volume too. So we're always dealing with that pressure as well to address the need, for proposal support in our company.
My wife's dad, as she was getting towards the end of her college education, always liked to say that D is for diploma.
I love that. We had C's get degrees, so just get through.
Right.
But yeah, that pressure on proposal professionals, like I think there's that high, again, like you were talking about in academia, where you get the win and everyone's like, yeah, we have the best proposal team ever. And you're like, I did that. Like maybe it was that pushing things around at the 11th hour that did it, but I did that. But then there's also that pushback. If something goes wrong, it doesn't matter if it was you as the proposal professional or like the technical team that dropped the ball on you. it comes back on marketing. And so there's just that constant fear of like, I don't want to be the one to drop the ball. At least
Right.
that's how it was for me when I worked in house. I was just constantly afraid that if I didn't put 100% effort in all the time, someone would come at me and it would be
Mhm.
my fault that like we lost or my fault that whatever happened happened.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Rochelle. That we definitely feel that pressure too. And sometimes, that's the implication as well. Okay, we weren't selected for this, and then there's multiple things that go into winning a proposal, like winning a game, right? It's the practice, it's the team members all working together, it's all of this stuff, but because we're the ones to hit submit or we're the ones to produce and finalize the product, right? If it's DQ'd, right? Or if it's non-responsive, like that's a huge weight. We are responsible for that. It's our job to make sure we've hit every single requirement in that RFP, right? From formatting requirements to the technical requirements, that we submit it the right way, whether it needs to be in sections or whole thing. So we're constant, there's kind of some anxiety that drives the constant reviewing of the RFP just to make sure we've got everything. Because if we hit submit and something goes wrong, it does come back on us. You're absolutely right.
Well, and I think on the design side too, I remember one of the first jobs I was given to run on my own was a new high school, like full design from start to finish. I got to do the whole thing myself. And, this was like 6 or 7 years into being in the industry. And, um, my goal was to put forth a set of drawings that there would be no QC comments on. And I thought I had done it. And man, when I got it back, it was just a total bloody mess. And so I think, you learn the lesson that the only perfect job that you ever complete is the one that never got built because nobody found your mistakes. So,
Yeah, that's actually a good point too. So when I was a college student, I prided myself on having like A's and A pluses on every term paper or research paper I created, or I worked on. Um, and so when I would submit a proposal draft, my goal similarly was to have no comments, right? Oh, it's perfect the way it is. And then it would come back and there would be some comments and I would be like, oh, I would like, these are errors, but they're not. It's just the part of writing collaboratively, right? It's just the part, it's just, feedback is an important part of that overall development process. So I had to let go of the perfectionism of, this needs to be perfect the first time out.
yeah. So, you know, being in the industry now for a little bit, you're kind of starting to experience the same things. What led you to kind of deal with that differently, or what were some signs that made you realize you needed to make some changes?
So the big one was the end of my marriage. I mean, to put it bluntly, I I had developed this practice of not being present and not being around and not saving any time for this aspect of my life, right? So I was all work, all focused on that, constantly prioritizing that. It definitely took a toll. I started my new role at this company, or I started my job at this company, and I think initially we thought there would be some change, but again, I had developed these habits that meant that I was right in the same practices that I was doing before. Um, I remember, we had filed for divorce, and I was sitting there. I was in a very contemplative kind of like, all right, Davina, we need to think through all of this. You're dissatisfied. You're frustrated at your work. This part of your life isn't going well. So I did seek out a therapist, and a friend kind of compelled me to do this. She goes, it could be really helpful to understand the root of the problem. Understand, because I always was kind of thinking, I can figure this out. I can figure out why things are not working. I don't need someone to help me do this. But I had a really close friend of mine kind of talked me into this. And so I started some sessions with a therapist, and I was with that therapist for about 3 or 4 months, right when we had filed for divorce. And some of the things she said was helping me understand what internally is driving my compulsion to work and my habit of just ignoring, the consequences or the impacts. So we talked about things like OCD and anxiety and perfectionism, and how some of those things are what drive the tendency to overcommit, right? To not have boundaries, to say yes to everything, or feeling like you need to say yes to everything. So that was kind of the first thing, that kind of the first step. And then the second step is I'm a member of S&PS, and there was a webinar on burnout. And it came up in all the kind of listings of webinars, and it was led by you and Rochelle. And it was in 2022. And at that point, I had tried a few different things, and I was working with this one therapist, and I was like, what is this burnout that people speak of? And I listened to that webinar, and it was interesting hearing kind of these are the signs of it, and it was just really impactful for me. It was the first time I was saying, yeah, these are all the things that aren't taking a toll on my physical, body, and my personal life, and my mental and emotional state, so it just kind of opened up the door for me to start doing some research and reading and trying to expand my knowledge in that way. I was understanding things like anxiety and fear and how that drives certain obsessive compulsive behaviors when it comes to work. But now I needed kind of the tactical actions. What do I do now to combat it? Now that I know these things, what are the steps I take to try to break myself out of those patterns? So the first step was really that webinar, even learning what that term is. It seems weird now because I hear it all the time and people are much more conscious of it. But 5 years ago, I was not even aware that that was a condition, really.
And what was that moment of realization like?
I mean, I remember I was like, well, I need to get in touch with people who know how to handle this and know what this is. And I remember in that conversation, in that webinar, and I took notes, this idea of intentions, right? And I had never thought about intentions, like why do I do what I do, right? What is my intention in doing this, right? And I realized there was not a whole lot that was intentional, or at least my intentions were not focused. They were only focused on achievement, right? All my intentions were driven on advancement, achievement, hitting a goal. But I wasn't really thinking anymore outside of that. So that webinar talked about how to write an intention and what's a good intention. And to me, it was like this, it's something so simple and I've never thought of it before. So it was a pretty great moment of realization in the sense that I knew that there was help and there was ways to get out of it. I could get out of these patterns.
Yeah, so you worked with a therapist. You and I have obviously worked together as coach
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
client. Did you seek out any other sources of help from the company or anything like that?
So I didn't from the company. And that's kind of rooted in my personality where when I show up to work, I'm work ready. I have a hard time being vulnerable at work. So I'm getting better at that because it humanizes me with my team, but I was still kind of in a space. And even when I was going through my divorce, I never let that impact my work, right? So I'm still there every day. I'm still focused on my job. Same thing when I was teaching, but I've always had this kind of wall between, professional and making sure that I'm doing what I'm, handling my responsibilities, and whatever is not related to that, I'm keeping over here. So I am good at compartmentalizing in that sense, So I didn't seek out any resources through work. It's not to say that they don't have resources.
Probably helped you get to the
Maybe.
burnout in the first place, right?
Right. Exactly.
So you mentioned intention and that being a part of a tool that you use. What else have you learned to help you work through your burnout and work past it?
So now I have a bunch of things I do. And I've been gaining, this kind of group of activities that I do to keep myself back, like on the path of, or focused on my intentions. So one is having my list of intentions and making sure that I do look at them every day, right? If not every day, then I might miss a day here or there, but they're always in places that I can easily access. And I used to at first just keep my intentions at home, but now I actually have them at work too, so that I can always regroup, And for me, things, and this is going to sound cliche, but things like meditating and journaling, for me, those have been kind of lifesavers, and it's like 5 minutes in the morning, just centering and remembering what's important, right? Because I do still have the habits are still there, like they're embedded, they're kind of endemic to who I am now, so I can always fall back into the habits that result in burnout. So it's a conscious effort every day for me to practice boundaries and practice, protecting myself, my mental state, my emotional state. So I start every morning with like 5 minutes of meditation at least. And then I've got a couple of different journals, but they're really for checking in. They're not kind of exhaustive, extensive journals about my day, but they're kind of check-ins. And then I'll go back and I'll read those in the evening, so that'll kind of keep me on track, like, in terms of, how did I want to show up today? Was I able to do that? What did I do well today? The other thing too is kind of really acknowledging my accomplishments, even if it's like I got 2 things done on my to-do list. I think a lot of what drove my compulsion to work was always focusing on what I didn't get done and feeling like, well, I need to now double down on the amount of time I'm spending on work to get those things done, So now kind of keeping track of, okay, well, we did move these things forward and we did get these things accomplished, and we're pretty satisfied with what we got done today. So the self check-ins are really important for me. And just having a lot of it, like my intentions have to be really visual. They have to be around me, so I've got Post-its on my mirrors. I'm that person now, just so that they are constant, they become a part of my day, a part of my thinking, as I work through the day.
And you mentioned earlier that you thought you could kind of pull yourself out of this on your own. How important has support been from people in your life, from work,
Yeah.
just to help you work through this?
Yeah, hugely important. So on the kind of family front, I think one of the things early on was really talking to my family about it. So the family that even my ex-husband, like we talk about it now, and we talk about and my sister and my nieces, they all know kind of how Davina has been for many, many years, but how that's impacted them. If when I'm not present, what does that do? Or when I'm prioritizing, work over them, how does that make them feel? And them telling me why they want to spend time with me. Like, we want to spend time with you. We enjoy being around you. So those types of conversations have been really helpful to me to remember and to think about, I need to have this space in my life. I need to create this space in my life. And so family, definitely. Friends too. When I moved out on my own and got my own place, I moved back to an area where I had a community. So I enjoy having a social life now. One of the things, because I'm a bookworm and an introvert, I have a tendency, I'm perfectly happy never leaving the house. I can be on the couch reading books and not go anywhere. And if I'm too much into my own kind of cocoon, I can get into those bad habits again of just kind of not being aware of other people and other things. So building a social life, a vibrant social life, has been important to making sure I set that time aside from work, right? So it's almost like creating these spaces that make burnout less of a possibility, right? If I'm really isolated and I'm detached from everybody and I derive a lot of satisfaction from work, then that's what I'm going to do, because that's what feels familiar, and I'm going to do it even though it's detrimental to me. So building out those other spaces has been kind of my project over the last couple years.
Yeah, I love that. I think both of us can relate to that too. We're probably
You were,
happiest
yes.
home by ourselves.
Happy to read my stack of books, not see the outside world. There are times I'll go like weeks and realize like I haven't left the house and I probably should. But yeah, for introverts, I think we have to go an extra step and just make it super intentional that we are reaching out into the world.
Yeah.
So we don't just like get stuck in our own minds and our own like head loops.
Yeah, I joke about it now in the office because we can be hybrid, My office is like 7 miles away from my house. There's no reason why I wouldn't be able to get into the office, And
Well,
I
7 miles
find
in LA can take
that's true.
a
On a
while.
bad day, it's like 25, 30 minutes to get over there. But if I don't show up for a couple of days, people don't necessarily notice, but I'll notice I need to get back and interact with my colleagues, my coworkers, because I will very naturally turn into this like mole woman that never leaves the house. So I, push myself to go out there, be visible, be present, and also because I have a team. And if I have team members coming into the office and I want to be, I want to see them there, I want them to see me there. It's hugely important for relationship building, in terms of our company and our region and our LA office. So, I look forward to going in on the days that I go in.
So you talked about boundaries and how important those have become to protect.
Mhm.
What have you learned that's helped you keep those boundaries in place or practice keeping those boundaries in place? We're not perfect and we're not going to get it right all the time, but
Yeah. So they've been small changes. So one big one was separating my work phone from my personal phone. So some people, you've probably seen people that with their stacks of different phones. My own supervisor has done this, and she's actually been a great role model for me. She's been in the industry for a long time. She's really involved in S&PS. She's been doing this for years and years and years, and she is adamant about her weekends. She says my work phone stays in my office on Friday night, and I don't look at it. So she's been a great model about how to be very productive. She gets a lot done. She has a big team, but she is very protective of her off time, and that's been a relief for me to see someone to, speak that way and value their time outside of work. She's been a really great example for me, so yes, we work hard during our 8 to 10 to 12-hour days that we put in, but then, we shut it down. And so I ended up separating my work and my personal phone, and having, certain kind of focus times set so that, I don't have any of that kind of breaking into my, home life. I don't send emails, past a certain time, so one of the things I think that encouraged me in me, the sense that I had to work all the time and be available all the time, is sometimes I would receive emails at all hours of the night because that's when people are doing their work. And then my feeling was, are they expecting me to be also online, and they're not, right? It's just the time that they have to get their work done. And that's when they're doing their back and forth. But I'm now conscious of the fact that I'm not going to send somebody work over the weekend, or I'm not going to send people messages over the weekend. I'm going to wait for Monday to do that. So I'm trying to find ways, and I've found kind of boundaries. This is work time and then this is home time. And same thing with the way my apartment's set up. I have 2 bedrooms, one is an office, and then I shut that door, right? If I'm not working that, and that's a big step for me. Previously, I had let my work life just invade my home life, right? So my dining room table was covered in work. I had books on the bedstand and in the bed. I had, it was just everywhere. And now I've got it much more compartmentalized where it's in its own space.
I
So little things.
yeah, I actually was talking to somebody, it's probably been over a year ago now, but he actually puts in his emails like a standard thing where it says like, I am choosing to work outside of normal office hours. I do not expect a response from anybody outside of normal office hours. And that's just kind of like a little thing as part of his signature,
Hmm.
which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because it does, right? You do expect
Mhm.
people, when you get things outside of hours, there is that question in your mind of should I be doing this too?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there are those occasions where we're going to have to work a long day, or
Yeah.
we're going to have to do weekend work, or maybe the occasional all-nighter. I still do that. I'll be offline though, so then I'll try to protect myself in terms of if I have to go and work this kind of extended day, I'm going to try to do it in a way where I can be focused and heads down and not be disturbed, right? So I'll put kind of barriers up in that way so I can just get the thing done. So it's been kind of small steps that have been really easy to implement, but I never thought about the need to implement them before.
Yeah. So what advice would you give some of the other people out there who are struggling with burnout, whether they realize it or not?
Well, I think learning about learning root causes has been, learning the reason for the patterns. For me, it was a pattern that started many, many, many years ago. The overcommitting, the lack of boundaries, um, the the tendency to just overcommit, all of those types of things. For me, learning again, those root causes and what's compelling me to do that, and what I feel I need to prove, or why I'm, feeling like I need to put myself in these situations. There's a lot that I've learned just in the couple years where I feel much more empowered to make, to be more open and declarative about, here's what you can expect, here's what I'm going to deliver, being confident in the quality of work that I do. So I don't feel like I have to overdo it and overcommit. My work speaks for itself, communicating clearly. There's a lot that I can do regardless of the environment to try to protect myself from burnout, right? And I know, I moved from one profession into another one, brought the same bad habits with me. At one point, when I was about a year and a half into this job, I accepted another job, and I thought, well, if I move into this role, that'll take care of all of my problems. Or it'll be a different environment and maybe I won't be so exhausted all the time. But I knew I could tell that a lot of it has to do with how I handle the challenges that come day to day. And I really wanted to learn how to be more proactive in protecting myself, right? And recognizing the burnout and taking the steps to alleviate and resolve it. So that regardless of the environment, I would at least have the tools and know what to do. So that's what I work on every day. Like I said, it's an ongoing practice. So I guess in terms of advice for someone, it'd be one, it's to get help, right? Sometimes you just need help. You just need to talk to somebody who can coach you through, the steps, some actionable steps that you can take to combat and to counteract burnout. Being educated and learning more about it was kind of the hugest thing for me. And then realizing that it is a practice, right? So some days are going to go better than others. Some weeks are going to go better than others. And I know you and I have talked, and I'll say, okay, this wasn't a great week. And I fell back into some bad habits, and I slept on the couch, and I was up all night again, and I was doing some of those things again. So also finding people you can talk to about it too. I think even within our own team, at my company, we talk about the need to protect our time. I have one colleague who I've known since I pretty much started at this company. And she'll say to me, we might be in a conversation. She'll say, I feel guilty that I didn't open my laptop this week. I had work to do and I didn't do it this week. And I said, I know how that feels, that guilt that you're feeling. I said, the next time you feel that guilt, text me and we're going to work through that guilt, right? I'm going to do the same thing. So we're going to keep each other accountable, right? For feeling like we need to open our laptop and we're bad that we didn't do it. We're going to help each other through that feeling, so that you're not carrying that guilt, around with you.
Yeah, that's huge to have kind of an accountability partner that you can reach out to when you are feeling bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we're making that up, right? Like the bad feeling is coming from us. Nobody else is saying you should have worked this weekend. In most cases, there may be some people who are thinking it or wishing that we would have, but yeah, a lot of that pressure is coming from us. So
yeah, you're right. And in fact, I have consciously done the thing where I feel compelled, I feel I need to do work, and I don't do it. Did anything change? Right. On Monday, did the world fall apart? No. Did we still get everything done? Yes. Did we do, so recognizing how much of it is kind of internally driven and internally fueled, I think that's why understanding root causes is really important, right? And sometimes you need, the help of a therapist or somebody who's trained to help you excavate some of that so that you can recognize how much power you have and how much, capability we have, to do things, right? To take action, to resolve or to deal with some of the burnout symptoms we deal with.
yeah, and I think the other thing that you said that's really important, and Rochelle and I talk about this a lot, right, is that there are going to be times where it's really good and you're dealing with it really well, and there are going to be times where you fall back into it. And she and I talk about it all the time. Does that mean we're not burned out? No, we still fall into that trap.
All the time. It's why we're experts on it, because we cycle through it and cycle out of it. And
Yeah.
we're human. It's what humans do.
Yeah, I think we're just a lot more aware that that's what's actually happening to us, and then we can deal with it because we have that awareness. But it doesn't help us prevent it from happening again and again.
Right. And I love the term recovering, right? Because it's this kind of you know, it's always happening, right? It's always something that's, you're never recovered. You never like cured of it. You might, we're going to have those phases in life where we're overloaded and we're overwhelmed and we're going to get exhausted. One of the real things, interesting or kind of eye-opening things to me from that webinar was defining burnout. And I think it was either you, Jeff, or Rochelle, I'm not sure who gave the definition, but it was what is something like a constant state of mental and emotional stress, right? And that can happen at work, that can happen in life. So there's so many ways in which burnout can, result from just being and living in the world, working in the world. And just knowing the definition of it so that you can say, yeah, I'm in a constant state of stress right now, whether it's work related or life related. I need to do something about it, or I need to, take action to try to counteract this, or, give myself a break or do something. That's hugely empowering, just knowing that.
And now it's time for burning questions.
I think for our burning question today, since we have you, I thought we'd ask you a question. So as a director, and you have, I think you said 8 employees. So what are you trying to do to help your employees avoid a similar fate? I know one thing that we talk about a lot, right, is as a director, we can tend to take things on to try to protect our people. So how do you balance that kind of, I don't know if need or why we do that to ourselves, but how do you balance protecting your team and that idea of protecting yourself? Or what are some things you're doing in that arena?
Yeah, that's a good, well, these are things I'm kind of learning as I go. So I know early on my sense of protecting my team was to make sure that they're not overloaded. So then that means to overload myself, which is not going to help me when it comes to my burnout. So we definitely focus on having balanced workloads as much as possible. We're very clear about our workloads, and I'm always very respectful of their time. So before I assign anything, do you have capacity to take this on? And I really want them to think through the allocation of hours to get something done, and to be really open and honest with me when they, this is going to put me in a difficult situation, and encouraging my team to talk to me openly in that way. I know when I first started, if something was assigned to me, I just did it. And I might have, 4 other concurrent deadlines, but I wasn't going to tell them that I couldn't do it, So giving them the safety to say this is too much, that's not going to make me think less of them, right? That's not going to make me think that you can't handle it. It's you telling me what your limits are. And I need you to communicate your limits to me so that I can assign it elsewhere. I can, tell my supervisor we need more resources, or I push back on the team and say, you can't have it by then, but we can do this. But I need them to feel comfortable and safe telling me, what their needs are and what they can do. Because obviously I want the best work that they can do. I want them to be in a situation where they can produce good work, not where they're feeling rushed and just kind of cranking stuff out, so that they can hit a wall of deadlines that I've given them. So I think as a director, definitely kind of clear communication and a lot of, regular meetings and check-ins with them. And then also in those check-ins, really encouraging them to enjoy their time away. Anytime somebody goes on PTO, I always say, enjoy your time away. This is important. Being away from here is important. Come back refreshed, put your out of office on, don't look at your phone. And then I'm trying to work on modeling that as well. I have a supervisor that's done a great job modeling that to me for the last, 3+ years. And, I want to, I try to do a similar thing. Now, when I'm not so great at that, my own team will call me out on it. They're like, okay, so you're supposed to be out of office on Tuesday, but your light was green and I saw that you took a meeting, right? So they will kind of point out they're paying attention, and I want them to go away and enjoy their time away and come back refreshed. I need to do the same thing. If I'm exhausted, if I'm tired, if I'm cranky, I'm not a fun director to be around, I'm not a fun person to be around. So, and then the other thing too, is actually talking about these issues, in our regional meetings. So another thing that we've started to do is, talk about burnout and help the team as a group, understand what it is and to feel safe kind of saying, yeah, we experience these things, and sharing their own tips for combating it. So in our recent meeting, we did a show and tell, and we said, what are our tips and tricks for managing, stress and burnout? And everybody had like a little thing that they do. They have like a meditation app. I showed my journal. But I think what's really interesting about that is we're showing as a company, or I'm showing as a director, that this part of their life is important too, right? That I'm acknowledging this as an important part of their life as well. So not every meeting is going to be about, the proposal process and, are your P&Ps correct? And are you using the right formats? And training them for interview prep. So we do have those training sessions, but we also want to set aside time for, maybe we need some, tips and training on time management, or, talking with our technical team in a way that doesn't create, stress and frustration, during that process. These are important parts of their lives, and they impact their jobs. So we need to make space for those. And we've started to do that, and I want to keep doing it, just so they know that, as a company, or as a team leader, we value that. It's an important part of their life and my life, now that I recognize it.
Yeah. I guess as a side question to this, what advice would you give people who maybe don't feel like they're in that safe of a space where they could talk at work about this, or don't feel like they're going to get a good response from having that conversation? Do you have anything you would tell them?
Yeah, well, it's important to find that space. It's important to find those people. I know initially I wasn't open about it at work. I was never going to let any vulnerability come through at work. So a lot of my initial kind of searching and seeking help was outside of work, but it is an investment, right, of time. It's a commitment of time to work through things. Seeing a therapist or a coach consistently is a commitment, right? Put it in your calendar and do it. If you really want it to make an impact, it has to be something you make time for. So I would say, seeking out help is a key thing to do. Talking to people, I remember one of the things I did early on was I had my sister, who I'm extremely close with, and my brother-in-law, they've known me since grade school, right? Kind of write their perception of me, right? Like I'm trying to understand myself better. And this is something your own family can do. If you have members of your family that are close enough with you that can, talk to you and honestly, about how you impact them and the relationships that they have with you. And just that first step was kind of also recognizing that I'm important to them. They want me to be around. I think there's things that you can do with the people in your life, in your family, in your social circle, to kind of help you develop a sense of a more well-rounded sense of who you are. And that can be a starting point. But then also, yeah, seeking out help. I was scrolling through S&PS and found a webinar on it. And I said, I need to learn about what this is. So
yeah, I think our own perception of ourselves is probably fairly skewed from the way other people see us, and it's great advice to get in touch with that, to see how other people see us, because they're probably right, and we're probably being really hard on ourselves.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Rochelle, did you have any other questions for Davina, or?
No, I love everything that you have said, and I'm sitting over here being like, I wish I had had a supervisor like you in my early career. And just also how brave you've been. Like, this is new territory for the industry, I think, to be vulnerable and to be human and to show up as that in the office. So I love the advice of seeking outside help first and then using that to build the confidence to then come to your team. I think that's absolutely invaluable advice for all of our listeners. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Love it.
Is there anything else you wanted to share, Davina, before we wrap?
Well, just thank you for the opportunity. I mean, the change just, to talk about it here, but then also as a part of my own journey, it's definitely something I've become more interested in and invested in. I was in the office yesterday and someone mentioned, like, Davina, you're so much more smiley now. You're walking around, you're so much more. It's not that my workload changed or the pressures changed, right? But just it was kind of a really small affirmation that I'm on the right track. And I was, I feels much better to me to go into work and be, you know, lighter and less stressed out, when my tactic before was always to go in with like a scowl and like with my war paint on, like ready to like tackle the day. And I can speak honestly that the work over the last couple of years and just learning over the last couple of years has been a huge impact on my my definitely my work life balance, if we want to call it balance, but also just my general contentment, with my job, with my life. So it's been a good experience over the last couple of years.
Well, I want to thank you for bantering with us. And I do want to acknowledge your courage and vulnerability. Takes a lot of that to come on a podcast and share for the world to hear your journey. But hopefully your journey helps inspire some other people who are struggling in the industry to take the step and get some help and hopefully turn their story around too. So thank you.
Yeah, I really hope so.
Yeah, so a friendly reminder to our listeners, if you have a burning question, you can email it to us at burnoutbanter@gmail.com. Please remember to like or subscribe to the podcast on Amazon, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to make sure you never miss an episode. And finally, if your organization is struggling with burnout and stress management, Rochelle and I offer in-house coaching to help your staff get back on track. You can reach out to us at that burnoutbanter@gmail.com email or via LinkedIn for personalized support tailored to your team's needs. So thanks everybody for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next month.